Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this morning's Zoom webinar presented by the Chamber of Commerce for Greater Moncton. Today, we're very pleased to have with us two individuals who will lead us through a discussion on how charities and not-for-profit organizations can navigate the challenging post-pandemic world. I'd like to welcome today Debbie McGinnis, who I'm sure all of you know of the United Way of Greater Moncton in southeastern New-Brunswick, and also Greg McKim of McKim and Associates for today's Zoom. My name is John Wishart, and I am CEO of the Chamber. Bonjour à tous, bienvenue au webinaire Zoom de ce matin présenté par la Chambre de commerce pour le Grand Moncton. Aujourd'hui, il est mon plaisir bienvenue Debbie McGinnis de Centre-Est de la région de Grand Moncton et du sud-est du Nouveau-Brunswick et Greg McKim de McKim et Associates. Je m'appelle John Wishart, je suis le PDG de la Chambre. As I'm sure everyone on today's call knows, the months ahead will be challenging ones for charities and not-for-profits. How do we fundraise in this new economic environment? How do we keep our volunteers and boards engaged? And how do we best continue to serve our clients? So before I turn the virtual podium over to Debbie, who will introduce our presenter, I want to remind everyone that you can pose your question at any time during the presentation via the chat button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Just type your question there and I'll pose as many as possible to Greg as time allows at the end of his presentation. And also please note that we've muted everyone's microphone except for our presenter. So with that, I'll turn the podium over to Debbie for some opening remarks and to introduce Greg. Debbie?
Thanks, John, and thanks everyone for attending this webinar. It's a big topic that we're undertaking, and by no means do we think we'll answer all questions or solve all problems today, but we hope this is just the first of several webinars. So it's my pleasure to introduce Greg McKim. Greg has led $20 to $30 million businesses with over 900 employees in a variety of industries. He has owned and operated small businesses throughout his career. With extensive experience in the Eastern Canadian market and in Ontario for both private and government-based industries, he demonstrated the ability to improve services, accomplish dramatic volume and profit increase through organic growth, acquisition, and new contract development. Trained in Lean Six Sigma, he has full understanding of the process's goals and implementation. Greg is presently working with local for-profit and not-for-profit organizations to provide expertise in leadership mentoring, market assessments, operational effectiveness, and training. So I'll turn it over to Greg.
So good morning, and thank you for attending this presentation. As introduced, my name is Greg McKim, and I will be your presenter for today. My organization, McKim and Associates, specializes in business efficiency with a focus on clarity of direction, rebuilding and redirecting of organizations. The goal today is to discuss the creation of foundation for decisions and a consistent platform to address the situation. I have a number of slides. I also have a number of links that as I was preparing for this, that I uncovered that I believe will be of value to you, and these will be sent out at the end of the presentation. In my career, I've developed platforms to engage my clients and my customers to approach challenges, issues, and day-to-day activities. It was done for two purposes. The first was to ensure we had a systematic step to approach to address all these issues. There's value in this so that you don't miss any of the key steps. And the second was to ensure that everybody understood where we were in the process at any given time. Understanding that there is a framework provides a reference point for you, your team, your funders, your board as you're moving forward, and it also provides some comfort. And we'll discuss this today, providing you with suggestions, information, and formats to utilize as you're getting ready to emerge from where we are. So why do this now? Well, there's two reasons. First, we will get out of this. We have no choice. We are seeing the lifting of restrictions, and we need to be prepared to move forward with urgency and flexibility. Our timelines are intertwined with everyone else's. We do not have control, for example, when some organizations will be allowed to open or not. So, excuse me, if you wait until there's an announcement, you'll be behind the 8 ball, so to speak, and you'll be playing catch up at a time when you need to be putting your focus on the reopening of the organization. Second reason is that during times of crisis, we are inundated with a lot of information. Emotions are impacted, there's chaos. Psychologists actually inform us that we lose IQ points during crisis or intensity. It's one of the reasons that police and soldiers are trained to use muscle memory in times of stress, so they can react without thinking, so to speak. So people are knocked out of routine. Choices have been removed. There's no reference point for us to gravitate to. Does that sound familiar to anyone here? As an example, it's like traveling to another time zone, changing and trying to change your normal routine. So if you're at 6 o'clock here and 9 o'clock where you go to, when you get up, you're still at 6 o'clock. It doesn't feel normal. We're out of sorts. And frankly, the whole world is out of sorts at this time. In addition, our normal pattern under stress is to gravitate to each other, to group together, to seek solace with the company of others. We can't even do this. So it really has changed how we address things. After the initial shock that we've all experienced, we may develop bunker mentality. And what bunker mentality is, that you have had so many things thrown at you, you're kind of hunker down, cover your ears, and you're just hoping to survive. Your thoughts are on defense only, and you cannot stay here. As leaders, we need to fight this. It actually impacts how you look at things and how your organization looks at things. So looking forward helps us to move from being a victim of our circumstances to a modicum of control. So addressing the challenge. It provides our teams and ourselves with hope, momentum, and normalcy. So the platform we're going to introduce today consists of 7 stages: assessing the situation, what has happened; addressing the situation, what are our options, what is our plan; engaging the response, putting it into action; communicating the plan; reassessing the plan; adjusting as necessary; re-communicating; and then repeating as required. The biggest challenge that we face is the unknown. We have faced crises before, but never experienced the rapid shutdown of basically everything at the same time. So, to illustrate that, picture a pond and a rock being thrown into it. It causes waves and ripples out in wider and wider circles. The initial splash is large and noticeable, and the remainder continue to ripple out, diminishing from that point of impact. Many times we don't know where these ripples or changes have gone, what they've impacted. Now, picture this: 100 rocks have been thrown into the pond at the very same time. Same effect, ripples are going out, but now they're intersecting each other and changing each other. This is what's happened. So what's that mean? Well, as a leader, it means that you can no longer, if you have been, looking at only what's happened to your own organization and what's happened to you. You must, to the best of your ability, look out past the first ripple into the multitude of ripples to determine what's going to impact your organization and your sector. This is a new reality. A good example of the ripple effect is the global supply on PPE, where challenges in some countries in the production and the amount of inventory they had impacted other countries' ability to supply masks, for example, to look after the frontline workers. Our challenge is we don't know what these impacts are or will be. If we don't consider these, however, to the best of your ability, and I say the best of your ability because no one knows, but you have to look out from your own immediate segment, you will get blindsided. So we don't know what will happen, but we do need to prepare and keep ourselves and our organizations nimble. And you will hear this again and again from various sources. We need to be nimble. So let's start with some things we do know regarding the sector that you were engaged in. So we go back to 2008 recession. It's probably one of the better examples that we can use because it crossed over countries and industries in 2008. For this sector, we know that during that time, because of the financial impact, donations were impacted negatively from 5 to 9% over 2 years. In addition, if I use US information, 5% of charities and not-for-profits didn't survive. So there were casualties for that. Imagine Canada, which is an advocate for this sector, forecasts that if we're shut down for 3 months, that 100,000 jobs and $9.5 billion will be lost. We also know that not-for-profits and charities do not have large stashes of cash in reserve. You're spending your cash to do your service. We know that large amounts of money have been placed into the country by the government. We don't know what the effect will be of that spending. We do know that the essential services that you provide in the sector will grow in demand as the client needs increase. We also know that businesses, community partners have been impacted and may not be able to continue to support you and your organization as they have before, and perhaps not at all. So we're in a perfect storm. Demand will rise, funding may decline or stay the same. What to do? So let's get to this. Picture yourself as a captain of a seaboat, or a sailboat rather, cruising through waters when a rogue wave, this time it was a tsunami, casts you upon a reef. In addition, a fog immediately descends and you can't see anything. Thankfully, it's low tide and we can review our predicament. Many of you have already done this. So we need to start with some core fundamental questions before we do anything else. Are we sinking? If this is your situation, all focus needs to be placed on rectifying this, nothing else. Are there gaping holes in the boat? Is water pouring in? Will water pour in? Can we float? Can others that serve the same clientele serve the same ones that we're serving? Are we serving theirs? Will organizations need to pick up some of the needs that theirs cannot? So we also need to look at our people and our processes. Does the organizations and crew have the resources and training to maintain what we do? Managing people working in their homes is different, as I'm sure you're finding out. So you need to write these things down and prioritize them in importance. If I can't fulfill my mission, how do I ensure that it gets completed? What do I do to ensure that people I serve, to the best of my capacity, my team is secure? So we've assessed the immediate situation. We're out of imminent danger, the danger of sinking. However, we still do not know what the future will bring. The organizations that responded to the survey indicated that they have, a recent survey that was put out indicated that they have a 3 to 6 month window in order to maintain themselves. You need to be aware of this because the time that you have will determine the speed and significance of your responses. So what do we do? Sorry. Let's look at our options. I know this sounds counterintuitive. We don't know what's going to happen. Fog's in. We can't see if there's another rogue wave coming, how big the economic wave is, what other waves will hit us, how long will the situation last. We can't control what we don't know. However, we can provide ourselves with scenarios that allow us to pivot as new information comes available. Creating flexible options and scenarios made with parameters allow you to make what-if decisions to address possible outcomes. It gives you the ability to think forward rather than only react. Decisions made in haste are seldom right. Now is the time to look at your plans. You would ask, why would I do this? Well, it's simple. All your plans have changed. In short, the world has. If you create new plans with assumptions, you will be in a position to pivot based on new information coming in. A fundamental truth is it's easier to adjust plans than create from scratch. We've seen pivoting in the car and brewery sectors making PPE instead of their normal products, keeping their organizations relevant. You may have the time now to do whiteboarding, what ifs, rather than waiting until you have 100% knowledge of things like openings and what's going to happen. And then you need to make that decision now while you have some time. So I recommend we use a 3 possibility forecast method. So let me clarify, when I say forecast, I don't mean rebudgeting with all the details. It would be a waste of time. I mean top line speculation. It should consist of 4 things: your revenue. And let me talk about revenue for a minute. When I talk to the sector about revenue, revenue equates service. So without revenue, you're not able to provide service. With more revenue, you can provide more service. So that's where we'll be talking about today in context of revenue. You need 3 potential expectation or options. You need to look at your expenses. What are fixed, what are variable, and how do the 3 options impact them? You need to look at timelines. What are the key timelines in your year that will impact us? Fundraisers are a good example of that. If you have fundraisers that are planned that had been planned for the latter part of the year, what will the impact of not being able to fundraise due to your plans? And service, are your needs increasing or decreasing? Or are they changing? So we will go to forecast 3 scenarios. Worst case scenario, you may want to use where you are today. Down 30%, 20%, straight line that out for the end of the day, taking into consideration your timelines for other activities that you had planned for the year. Best case scenario. If you're tracking a budget, you must forecast when you will recoup the year and how. You must provide enough detail to demonstrate you have a plan. Some attention to these, same attention rather to these things that are impacting later in the year. And then the third scenario is a mixture of the 2, the in-between. So why 3 scenarios? When we project, especially under tough circumstances with a lot of unknowns, it's our nature to be optimistic, and it can create conflicts in us. We don't want to think about adjustments to our organizations, but we may have to in order to survive. Using the worst case scenario, it gives you permission to be negative. This is getting real. This will allow you to flesh out as many challenges that you can think of. So I will make a note of this. So now that you're down looking into your boat, you may only want to take your first mate and your first lieutenant with you. Why would you do this? It's because you'll be asking a lot of hard questions under this scenario that will alarm your staff and volunteers. These things may not come to pass, and while you want people to know you're planning for the return, you don't want to unnecessarily add to people's stress. So again, this is worst case scenario. You want to create trigger points that will help you in your decisions. So trigger points determine when actions absolutely must be taken. So an example may be when expenses reach this level. At a certain level, we may have to decide on program necessity. Sadly, it may involve changes to your organization. These decisions are best made when time is not urgently knocking on your door. So during this phase, you'll be checking in with your board for guidance and support, looking to your association at the same time. Gain insight from your peers, association, boards, and funders. So back to the boat. Take a flashlight, crawl into the bottom of the boat where the bilge water is, and look for cracks, holes, non-essential things that you may have been carrying for years. Name them, itemize them in critical order. This includes positions as well. So as an example, there are some positions that if you stretch things, the responsibilities can be shared among the rest of the crew. You have to be realistic or this process is wasted. 1/3 of you forecast, as I mentioned, that you have 6 months or less sustainability. This indicates that there must be priority as hard choices may be required. You need to understand where you are. The best case scenario cannot be pie in the sky, but positives based on information that you presently have. The middle forecast will be a combination of the 2. So 3 forecasts. So now the revenue. And again, the revenue equates to the ability of service that you can provide. So we're going to talk about your funders. So the Atlantic Provinces Economic Council has recently completed a not-for-profit sector report that we can assume is comparable to New Brunswick on key issues. They have provided a breakout of funding that, if not 100% accurate, at least provides us with the generalized view of where the monies that support your industry are coming from. I'm sure much of this will be little surprise to you. The major funders in various levels of government, from government contributions rather, account for 55% of the amount of money that is provided. The federal government provides 12%, municipal government provides 5%, and provincial government provides 35%. So this may not be accurate for your present situation, but at least give us a basis from where to have this discussion. Corporate donations generated 4%, but it was also noted that many corporations support associations through membership fees, and so you can add another 8% to that contribution. Individual donations consist of 9%, while the sales of goods and services provide 11%, and fundraising at 8%. And then there's other for 4%. So I provided a link to this report, and it's worthwhile for you to take a look at reading. So what? Why is this important? Well, surveys that we've had on this sector indicate that funding is the biggest concern. You need to take your funder group and assess them for risk. Going back to the ripple effect, we know that most of your generous contributors have been negatively impacted by all this. You need to know how this will impact you. This means some challenging conversations, but let me suggest to you that they're already having those conversations internally, so you're not going to be surprised. I've also taken the liberty to prepare a funder engagement talking points for you that will be sent out at the end of the presentation. When assessing your revenue, it's important that you look at the big nuggets first. First things first. So if you fell overboard in this boating scenario and sharks are circling, you wouldn't ask the rescuer how they're feeling about the whole thing. You just want them to get you out of the water. You must ensure you're not blindsided with unexpected reduction of funding. Remember, if you're anxious, so is everyone else. So no one has the answers. You can acknowledge that in your discussions that you have. They may not know what they will do for sure, but they will give you an indication of risk. There is some positive news. There's some, if you can consider it positive, there will be some industries are expected to be less impacted than others. In reality, some will actually excel during this time. So you need to take the time to identify those funders most at risk and also seek potential funders among those that are least impacted. The APEX forecast for the impact of COVID-19 suggests there may be, these may be organizations that are in health, finance and insurance, professional associations for lawyers and accountants, information organizations, utilities, business services. It's essential for you to connect with all funders, both for continuity of funding, membership continuity, and important to see how they are managing through these challenging times. Open conversations at this time will provide an opportunity for learning from all sides. Remember, they didn't want this situation either. They're under stress as well. They want to help, and perhaps they can provide suggestions. And in some cases, they may be even able to provide some extra funding for you. When you're dealing with the government, you need to make sure that you're connecting with your local MPs, MLAs, councillors, and mayors. They should know the importance of your sector. Sadly, that's not always the case. This sector is critically important to our society. The services that you provided are fundamental to the care that Canadians believe need to be given to each other. You need to remind the MPs, MLAs, and councillors of that importance. In addition, utilize your associations for this. It will provide you a louder voice. So imagine Canada and United Way as an example are already advocating for sector support on your behalf. For your individual donors, things have changed. People have lost jobs. Seniors have lost retirement investment. You must expect you will lose some of support here. So you need to connect with your donors and let them know that what you're doing. Request they increase donations for a period of time or longer. Identify any that are at risk. So for fundraising, and I know that's a hot button, it was interesting to note that it said on average it was 8% in Nova Scotia. Some of the information that we have back from you that are attending this today is it may be 50% or more. Distancing will make fundraising totally new again. I mean, they are lifting some of the restrictions that we've had, like for golf, but golf will not be the same as what it was before. And you can't put all your eggs in one basket. Sadly, there's no magic wand to change the circumstances. If you've missed a key fundraiser, the money's maybe lost completely. There are other options if this becomes a critical loss to the mission. You need to cut costs to sustain your operation. That's a no-brainer. If you haven't looked at that so far, you need to do it. But look at it in the context of what we're doing in terms of the three options that you have. You may need to examine partnering with another of-size operation or a larger one. You may look at amalgamation with a larger operation. You may need to look outside the province if you're a unique provider for ideas. So let's take a quick look also at the mission. Your responsibility as a leader is to protect the mission of your organization. It's a fundamental question that needs to be examined. When you are in duress, like we all are now, you need to make sure that your foundation is solid. It's like being in an earthquake. You go back, if you're going to look at going back into a house, you need to make sure the foundation is solid, and you can at least rebuild from that point. Why are we talking about mission? It is your fundamental purpose. So I'm not just talking about mission statements, although those are important because they should reflect what the mission and the purpose of your organization is. But I'm also talking about what you are actually doing. Are you working within your mission? Having an understanding of the fundamental mission that you provide will help you make decisions. So you need to ask these questions. Who are we serving? Can we still serve them? Is the need increasing or decreasing? If we have to choose between programs, what criteria will I use? You need to ask questions about your organizational governance. Are you up for the challenge? Do they have process and expertise to help you manage this? Boards are a tremendous resource experience. Is the board meeting often enough to provide real-time guidance for you? Have you, as the on-the-ground leader, been provided with enough latitude and parameters to make decisions on the fly? If you're not sure, you need to clarify. Have your board help you with this. You need to ask about your service. Are we still needed in the same way? And as I mentioned, are our people trained, and do they have the assets and need to do work from their homes? These are all basic questions that need to be answered. So when we take a look at this, the recap for us is you need to look at your clarity of your mission, because that will give you a base point for all decisions that you have. You need to reaffirm that the reforecast, the reason that you're reforecasting is that you need to ensure your survival and come out stronger. You need to allow yourself to be able to pivot from where you are. And communicating and raising your profile is essential in this time. People do take this segment for granted. You provide essential services. If you shut down for a week, just imagine what kind of chaos there would be. So then we look at our people. Look at your crew. They're anxious. Are they safe? Is the organization safe? You must be frank and confident that you're managing the situation. Not that you have all the answers, but that you are calm. You are the leader. You are controlling the narrative. If the team is working from home, again, make sure that they have materials and the technology. Make sure they have some training. And again, I provided some helpful links at the end of this process that will help you look at some of those suggestions. You also need to determine a way to measure their effectiveness. It may become a new way of providing your service. So if that's the case, you better understand it now. Dispersed teams require different management styles. You must communicate and meet more often. However, the meetings should be less focused on efficiency and more on how the team is doing. You need to provide specific direction with outcomes, and they also need to be short term, because you can't give them something and then go away and hope that in 3 to 4 weeks that they'll have it accomplished. You need to be checking in and giving those outcomes. They're finding that staff are having a hard time dealing with being at home and working because they're not sure what the outcomes are that they're supposed to be generating. There's a difference between people that are working with families in their homes that is causing some chaos and challenges to them, that they feel that they have to work from the 9 to 5 if that's what the time was, when in fact the focus should be on outcomes, and maybe they work after hours when they put the kids to bed. People that are on their own are starting to feel, sometimes we're starting to feel that the expectation on them is greater than it is for those people with families. You just need to be aware of these things. We need to ensure that we're celebrating any progress that we have. It's more important now than ever. We also need to ensure that your team is kept whole. And that means they need to be interacting with each other. They were used to doing it in a face-to-face situation. You need to make sure that they are connecting. There's been suggestions that you could open the day with a quick meeting to allocate recommendations and expectations, and then provide another meeting at the end of the day just to kind of check in on your team, let them share experience with each other, make sure that they're all aware that you're moving the process forward. Need to watch for email overload at the present time. Anxious people will want to communicate more. Organizations are seeing this now. Understand that your people are anxious. Remember, if you're driving the bus, you have a bigger windscreen and can see further down the road than those that are sitting in behind you. Remember that when you're talking to your team. I have 2 slides that I want to share with you from articles that I've reviewed that I think will be of value to you. First is a slide from BDO, which is an international consulting organization. They provide some an intuitive checklist for not-for-profits. And I've only just taken just a very few of the recommendations they have. I would urge you to go on their website and check the full list. But some of the things caught my attention more than others, including how will we support the mental health of our staff, and how will we support the challenges that our employees are going to have for financial debt. We've already talked about managing increasing demand for the services. We do need to have a communication strategy that helps us internally and externally. We need to be aware of that. You need to look at the business processes. So there's a number of things that they have on their website that would be very valuable for you and your team to go through to gain ideas. The second slide is from Deloitte, which talked about being a resilient leader. And I thought this was of value because it talks about what type of leadership is required during these situations. And so one of the key things, there's 5 key things that they embrace, is one of them is you need to be both thinking from your heart, empathetic with your teams, but also from your head. There are hard decisions that are going to have to be made. You need to put the mission first, and we talked about that. We need to aim for speed over elegance. And all that means is that you are not going to get everything right. You need to give yourself some grace. Mistakes are going to be made. Mistakes are being made. But we need to understand that sometimes you just need to make decisions with the best information that you have. And we've talked about owning the narrative and embracing the longer view. It was interesting that their comments just show that a leader at this time needs to be able to work in multiple time frames at the same time. So not only are you looking about where you are today, you need to look at how you're going to recover and how you're going to thrive. So they say that there's 2 types of companies that will come out of this, or 2 types of organizations: those that are stronger than when they went in, and those that are not. And those that are stronger will forge ahead. Those that are not may fall by the wayside. There's increased demand on the leadership to be nimble and to be considering a multitude of things at the same time. So we're now going to talk about engaging. So we've now assessed our situation, we've addressed our situation. We're now going to talk about engaging our plan. So all the engaging is really putting those plans and those ideas that you've put forward to put them into play. So remember, the fog's lifting slowly. There's some things that you will actually start that you will not complete. Understand that, because more information is coming in. Your assumptions may be wrong. This is the time that you immediately start to check them. As is indicated in the previous slide, you need to be looking in multiple time formats. You need to look at the now. You need to look at your home staff and working and how they're working, ensuring that they are working in a positive manner, and on your partners as well. And also, now we need to look at our forward movement. So to put it in terms of our boating exercise, as your boat's starting to lift off the rocks and the tide's coming in, you want to make sure that your assumption that you're going to float is correct, and that you're able to at least maintain your boat in some sort of format with your existing things on the here and the now. And you also now want to start looking at, can I sail the boat? How fast can I sail it? And where can I take it? You need to really start engaging even at an accelerated pace than you already have. You need to check in your partners. You need to check in on your funders. You need to check in your associations. You need to see at this time if your service needs are rising at a faster pace than you anticipated. You need to see if your expenses are rising at a faster rate as well. You need to engage with people, and as other boats are lifting off as well, take a look around you. Some people may need help that you can provide. Some people may be able to provide help that you require. You also need, at this time, to be, as a leader, you need to, I call it, to be seen to be seen. And what that means is you need to be seen to be, you need to be visible to your staff, you need to be visible to your partners and to your funders and to all those around you. They need to know that you are there. They need to see you engaged in activities. You cannot afford to be behind closed doors, even if you are planning. You need to be very visible at this time. One of the key questions that you have to ask is, are you going to open your office when you're able to do so? You may have found working from home is a very positive thing for your organization. You may be getting a lot of things accomplished that you didn't anticipate. Well, even if you are going to open up your office, there's a number of things that you have to consider. You need to know, you got to look after distancing, you have to look after your systems, and you have to look after your system, your service from your operation. And I've provided a checklist for that for opening, as well as links for that other organizations have provided that you should be looking at when you are preparing to open. So communication. So you'll notice that the two communicators there are properly distanced from each other. Communication has been a consistency in all facets of the approach that we're using. This communication is kind of a formal time for you to stop, to check in, to see if you've connected with the people that you need to be connected to, and that you're being consistent with your message. You need to check to see how frequently you're communicating and what you're communicating. There is a tendency to communicate, and to communicate in large sentences and large paragraphs rather than key to the point. You need to check in to make sure that your approach and your team's approach is appropriate to this time. You also need to watch out for communication fatigue. And by that, it means that there's so much information coming to your teams and from your teams that people stop reading and listening. And I'm sure that we've all maybe reduced the amount of information that we're getting coming in from television news reports and other ways, because there's just so much. It just can not only tire you out, but it will actually fatigue you, or it will actually confuse you as well with the different information that comes through. So again, is communication we're using effective externally and internally? So we then move to the reassessment part. And what's that mean? Well, it means your ship's now afloat and is starting to move forward. You might be limping along, you might be bailing heavily, but you're moving. So now's the time to check. Is the boat moving the way it should? Are other boats ahead of you in the same situation? Are they ahead or behind? You need to check your plans to ensure you are where you thought you would be. Which of my 3 plans are closest to reality? As it's a perfect time to let your crew know that you are gaining results and that you, at the very least, are moving forward. Is there someone around you that can use help? Again, we should always be, we're all in this together only if we're sharing. Initially, your reassessment will be on a regular basis, your frequency you got behind, because you're getting more information, you're starting to see your progress or lack of progress. It will lower as time goes on, but it needs to be part of your ongoing work process. If your plans require adjustments, you do so. And you're going to find that many of your assumptions were incorrect. And if so, adjust. Once you've communicated, you come again to a formal chance or check-in on your communication. You want to continue to advise that your team and your partners and your funders and your associations of your progress and of your failures. If we've tried something and it hasn't succeeded, it may be as important to share that as it is the successes that you've had. Plus, someone else may be able to give you suggestions on how to make that become a success. As I said, we are not in this together unless we are sharing results, the good and the bad, the resources and our hope. Understand that because communication has changed, you have to be aware of the impact. Internal communications need to be honest and positive, and you need to celebrate, as we've talked about. And external, you need to celebrate impact that you're making. People need to know. It's a good time to be reminding people of what the services that you're providing. So we repeat as required. So what's that mean? Well, that means that as you flow through this practice, this just becomes a constant. You have to flow through each of the steps to ensure that you haven't missed any points. New information will be a continual thing. So things will come in, you will need to adjust as we go. And pivoting around issues will be ongoing. So, in summary, we find ourselves sailing on a new and uncharted seas. There are no silver bullets. We need to be nimble and watchful now more than ever before. We need to resolve to be stronger coming out of this. We need to be aware that people are anxious. We are only in this together if we share hope, resources, and time. And I will continue to repeat this as we go through things. There's an overabundance of information. Manage your info. Look after yourself as the leader. You have to be aware of everyone's issues, not just your own. It's tiring. Give yourself grace. You're going to make mistakes. Just continue forward. So the voyage will continue. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Greg. I have to mention to everyone that I'm a bit challenged myself at this moment. The power just went out at my house, so I missed the middle part of the presentation while I logged back in on my phone. So I may have a few difficulties seeing your chat questions, so Debbie may need to step in and help moderate those. But now is the time for the Q&A, so if you can find the chat button at the bottom of the screen to post your question. Il est maintenant temps pour les questions-réponses. Veuillez cliquer sur le bouton chat si vous souhaitez poser une question. I'd like to start off with one of my own, Greg, if I could. Somebody posted the comment while you're speaking that really charities and nonprofits right now are in information overload. There's so much coming at all of us at the same time. How do we, filter that so that, we pay attention, I guess, to the things that are really critical to the survival of our organizations?
That's a great question, John. I believe, as I said, you have to be very careful with what type of information that you're intaking. I heard the comment that there's lots of people speculating on TV, on the newscasts, but they don't know any more than the rest of us. So we need to ensure that that we regulate how much information is coming in. I think the thought of going back to the mission to ensure that what is relevant to the very foundation of your organization is paying attention to. Everything else is additional. And if you're able to make sure that your foundation is okay, you can move on to those additional things. But for now, I think you kind of start regulating how much information can come in to that very purpose.
Mm-hmm. One other question that I had, Greg, was related to boards of directors. I think probably every organization that's on the call has a board. And I know, on the operational level, staff tends to want to do everything and get through this. But should we be looking for more support or different types of support from our boards than maybe in normal times?
Yes, and that was part of what you may have missed here, John. When you're evaluating your mission and your organization, one of the questions has to be about board governance. Your board may only meet once a month or even once a quarter, like more likely once a month. You may need to you may need to have their assistance from a board's perspective on a weekly basis, or even more so than that. Boards have usually a wide variety of experience, which can be extremely useful to you. And they don't have any magic wands either. They are dealing with this on a first time, as most of us are. But it is, you want to make sure that you are running and engaged with your boards more so now than ever before.
Right. Debbie, I have a question for you. The federal government announced some funding for charities not too long ago. Have the details of that become apparent in terms of application process? What sorts of things might be covered by that funding?
Well, we have a call tomorrow afternoon with the CEO of United Way of Canada to sort of go over some of those details. We're hoping that we actually know how much funding we'll receive for this area in the next week and a half. There will be charities that have applied to us know we've had a tier 1 and a tier 2 application. So it'll be similar to that with a little more oversight. We expect to have more dollars than we have had to date. So yeah, so we are really hoping that we get some concrete information tomorrow. I know the contract was being signed with the federal government and United Way of Canada, community foundations and Red Cross, I think today or tomorrow.
Okay, so more details to come soon, hopefully.
Yes, we're really anxious to share them. We certainly know that people are looking for additional funds. Certainly in our sector, I know how many special events haven't happened. I know how much we'll be impacted by the loss of special events. So I think that the sooner that we can get some more money into the community, the happier we'll be.
Right.
Yeah.
Debbie, I wonder if you have any final thoughts for the group in terms of, from the United Way perspective, or what you see in the short and medium terms.
Well, I can say one thing. I keep looking in the chat because I know a lot of these people and they're usually not very quiet, so I'm surprised there's no questions. But it's a big, there was a lot of information shared, and I understand that. But really, we want to be able to move forward and drill down into some of the topics that were raised. Let us know what you'd really like to have more and maybe longer conversations about, with some back and forth conversation at the time, because I think it's important. I also know the people I do know well, you're the most optimistic group I know. So I think being able to look at our agencies with looking at the brutal truth of what it's going to look like for the next year to the best of our ability, I think it's just so important. I also know that, looking at what your mission is and having that as your North Star. I read an article by Board Source, and they really talked about staying true to your purpose. And I think that, each of you who are so just so passionate about what you do, and I see that with many of you every day, you just need to stick with that, use that as your North Star, determine what you're going to need moving forward, And then I think together people are going to have to figure out how we're going to do that. We're not going to do it individually. We all, as we know in the charitable sector, speak to the same funders, the same corporate donors, the generous donors we have in Southeast New Brunswick. So we also can't inundate them with just request after request. So I really think that working together and supporting one another and having more conversation will be the key, I think, for sure, moving forward.
Okay. Thanks, Debbie. A few questions are starting to come in now. There's a question from Joanne about, for Greg, about the fear that some employees have of returning to work under these circumstances. Are there any strategies you could maybe share about how we encourage people to return to work?
I think to answer that question will be in the preparation that you provide for returning to work. So you've decided, what it's going to look like when it returns to work. So you may end up staggering hours so that there's less people in the office if that's what's required. Some people maybe continue to work from home. But I think to answer that specific question, it will be in the preparation that you provide and advise your staff of what cleaning you've done. You may have put up plexiglass in between the offices. I mean, things that need to be considered now. That is part of it. That will give people some reassurance. You may need to, you'll have signage put up. You'll do the distancing that we're seeing in stores as well, that people, when visitors are coming into your office, what will happen. And I guess probably for me, the one of the key things will be in what type of cleaning that you have. So and how frequently it will be. I think this is a real thing that people are going to be concerned about coming back to work. And so those reassurances will help them somewhat. I know from a legal perspective that I think we're still working through that at the present time. I've heard various suggestions on that, but I think that at this time, kind of stay tuned as information comes out, and more, we are, as a country, let alone a province, we are just getting ready to return. And when we do return, it'll be in a faster process than we think it will be. And there'll be more information for this as we go forward.
Okay, a couple other questions have come in. One is a follow-up to that, was about stress and anxiety among staff. And, most charities that I know, frontline workers already face, challenges in that respect in dealing perhaps with vulnerable populations. How do you, for lack of a better word, keep morale up, or keep them moving forward in a hopeful fashion in these times?
I think from a perspective of people having anxiety, I think you need to give people permission to have that anxiety. So I've heard recommendations that it might be best to open your day and say to people, okay, we're going to take 10 minutes here to let's express what our anxieties are. Let's write them down. And we're going to give ourselves 10 minutes permission to kind of go to the negative and express our fears. And then we're going to put them aside and come back to them tomorrow at the same time and talk to them, because some of your anxieties may have changed, or they may have increased. But I think to give people permission to have that anxiety will be a very positive thing for both your staff and your organization. In addition, I think you just need to be connected with people as well. As I've said, as a leader, you need to be providing people with hope, and they need to know that you have a plan in place. You need to be communicating that plan. Again, honesty is the best approach. I think while we don't want to give people unnecessary things to worry about, I think they know that you are working hard on their behalf, your organization's behalf, to stay afloat, as it would seem, and then carry on from there.
Okay, one final question for you, Greg, and then there's one for Debbie. Do you see any downsides in involving your staff in return to work preparations, or should they be involved right from the get-go?
No, I think involving them is actually a great way to reduce that stress level for them coming back. If people have contribution to what the workplace, the new normal workplace is going to look like, I think that they'll feel a little more secure that any concerns that they've had have been listened to. So I would involve the team with immediately in those preparations. You may even want to allocate responsibilities for certain segments to certain people. But again, having participation this time will certainly lower stress.
Okay. And Debbie, finally for you, there's a reporter from the Times and Transcript on our call today, and he posted a question, which I know I'm going to put you on the spot here, but he's asking if there's been any analysis of the potential loss in funding for charities as a whole in our region going forward.
There hasn't, but we will. We are hiring a student, and that's one of the things we'd like them to try to evaluate. It's significant. I mean, there's no doubt about that, but we would like to have a bit of a handle on that as well and share it within the sector. So we, as I say, we're hiring a student, and that's part of the research we're going to ask them to do. So if you get a survey or if you receive a phone call, please answer. And it can be, we'll keep it anonymous on who thinks they're losing what. But I think it is important across the sector to know what people are going to be trying to recoup in some way.
Right. Yeah. Great point. Well, I'm going to end on a bright note, and that the fact my power just came back on. So I'm bathed in light. So I think that's symbolic somehow. And I would echo what Debbie said about the survey. I know everyone seems to be surveyed to death right now, but really gathering some intelligence about where we're all at is probably never been as important as it is now. So with that, I'd like to thank very much Greg for the presentation. Great information there, and Debbie for your involvement and leadership in this, and your continued leadership in the community. I know not-for-profits and charities are very important to the Chamber. We have more than 80 who are members of our membership, and we'll continue to think about the charitable sector as we go forward. I also want to mention a couple of upcoming Zooms. Tomorrow at 10 o'clock, we have Mona Fortier, who's the Federal Minister of Middle Class Prosperity and Associate Minister of Finance. She's going to be taking our questions. So if you'd like to fire a question away about the charitable sector to somebody who has the ear of Bill Morneau, here's your chance. And then this afternoon, we're going to be announcing another event in partnership with 3Plus called the Economic Leadership Town Hall. It's going to be held next Tuesday morning, and it will involve a couple of economists, some business leaders, just to give us a sort of a, here's the playing field going forward as we start to reopen. And there's increasing signs that maybe we'll get the sign to reopen at the end of this week. With that, I should mention that today's Zoom has been recorded. It'll be on our website, ccgm.ca, hopefully later today. And I really want to thank everyone for participating and for your continued great work in the community. And thank you again, Greg and Debbie. And let's carry on, and we'll continue to touch base. Bye for now.
Thanks, everyone.